Hello, everybody. Welcome to another excellent edition of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. With us, your hosts, we have names, but don't worry about it. We'll talk about that later. I always feel weird. We never introduce ourselves, and we're like 12 podcasts in, but just we'll do it.
I assume most people know who we are by now.
I hope so. We're notorious.
Yes.
Around the internet. If you want to know who we are, you'll be able to find us pretty easily. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, welcome to the show. We're gonna talk about some stuff, some wrestling. In particular, I think we should probably start with this because it's the big news on everybody's face / lips / mouths. Is All Elite Wrestling made their second event on Saturday night, wasn't it? It was Saturday night.
It was indeed.
I missed it, and I'm gonna start by saying that it was. I don't know if I said this on a podcast, but I'm pretty sure I said to you a couple of months ago that I did not believe that Dean Ambrose would sign with All Elite Wrestling because it seemed to me that he was just burnt out from the grind and from wrestling in general, and it seemed that he just wanted to take a break. And I thought that what he might do was do some like little independent stuff, or like something that wouldn't be too stressful. I didn't think he'd go to TNA or anything like that. I thought he would just kind of keep his head down and just kind of wrestle when he wanted to, because a guy like that can get booked whenever he wants. He doesn't have to go searching for it, bookings. They'll find him.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I 100% was certain that Dean Ambrose wouldn't sign with All Elite Wrestling. And in a way, I was kind of right. Because Dean Ambrose is probably a registered trademark for the WWE, and therefore couldn't have signed with All Elite Wrestling. However, Jon Moxley did. He made quite an impact.
And he looks an awful lot like Dean Ambrose as well.
Right. Some might say, he does the same finishing move. I've noticed that. So, very similar young men. So, you've seen the show.
Yep.
Would you like to comment on how good it was?
Well, I think, compared to a lot of people, I didn't love the show as much as a lot of people seem to. I thought it was really good, don't get me wrong, and I thought it was a hell of a lot better than, a lot of the stuff that WWE have put out on pay-per-view for a long time. But I didn't think it was like this, 10 out of 10 show or the best show ever or whatever. Like, I think it's been overhyped a little bit, but it was still something that, like, as a kind of... I mean, this is more of an opening shot, I'd say, in like the new Wrestling Wars than their previous pay-per-view All In, because this is the first show since it's been announced that they've got a TV deal, that they're coming to TNT and ITV4 over here in the UK, and that they're actually moving forward as like a proper wrestling company. So this one was kind of putting the marker down in a way to show what kind of booking and matches and wrestlers that we can expect to see moving forward. And I thought on that front it was really good, because there was no bullshit, there was no kind of decisions where you kind of think, who the hell thought this was a good idea? And like, the wrestling quality was good, the matches were given plenty of time, and some of the stuff was just exceptional. I don't know if you have heard much about it, but the Cody Rhodes Dustin Rhodes match was fantastic, just off the charts good. Without even being like a kind of a match about moves or stuff like that, it was more. I don't know how to describe it. It was almost like it was more about the emotion and the storytelling and the selling, and then you mix in like the buckets of blood as well that Dustin Rhodes was spilling all over the place, and it just kind of made for like this big kind of awesome moment that kind of hit home, and this is the kind of like emotional connection that you struggle to find these days in WWE or mainstream wrestling in general. So yeah, it was, I think, a lot of positives coming out of this show.
Cool. Yeah, like the thing is, like I said, I haven't seen the show, but I did suspect that a lot of people, because that just seems to be the way the internet goes, but I suspected that a lot of people were a little bit too enthusiastic about the show.
Yeah,
I could totally imagine that it's not the best show of all time, but I also expected it to not suck ass. You know what I mean? Like, so yes, I can totally understand that aspect of it. It all makes sense. The so what do you think about Jon Moxley turning up?
well, like you said, I kind of was of the same opinion. I didn't think he'd show up. If he did show up, not straight away.
Mm-hmm.
So it made for like a cool surprise. Like apparently even the commentary team didn't really know about it. So him coming out the crowd and like the crowd really reacting to it as well. The reaction was awesome. It came across as like a super huge deal, and him like a massive star. And yeah, the fact that he came in after the main event and sort of took out all these top guys, well, Jericho and Kenny Omega, it was like, how big of an impact can you make? I mean, there you go.
What's interesting to me is that, Moxley's going to have to come in there and he's going to have to be a big deal. So the match for their heavyweight championship, as I understand it, is going to be Chris Jericho against Hangman Page.
Yep, that's right.
One would automatically assume that the de facto number one contender to whoever wins that match is going to be Jon Moxley.
Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if they aim to do another Jericho Omega match as well. Like, because they've got one win apiece now between AEW and New Japan, so they kind of need that rubber match. But I'd say because it's been, so it's so recent that they've had this second match, they probably won't do a third one for a while. So yeah, Moxley is a guy who's probably going to be in the title picture. You'd imagine like Cody as well. But it's hard to say, really. At this point, their roster is so like not very well defined outside of people who watch Being the Elite and that kind of thing,
right,
who are kind of already familiar with them.
Right. I don't really watch that show because I'm not really a fan of the Young Bucks. I love Cody Rhodes. I think that guy is a very, very good worker. And Kenny Omega, from what I've seen, is, he's good at what he does. I just never got into the Young Bucks.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. They were fantastic on the tag team match against the Lucha Brothers, Pentagon Jr. and Rey Fenix. Like, because the story going into it was the fact that the Young Bucks had only wrestled like twice this year, whereas the Lucha Brothers had wrestled, I think, 48 times, they said, as a team. So, like, the way they sort of played that into the match itself, with the Young Bucks suffering from, like, miscommunications to begin with, and then taking a while to kind of get their groove, I thought that was, it goes to prove that they're more than just like spot monkeys or whatever you want to call them. They do possess like good psychology, and they're not just all about the flashy moves or whatever.
Well, that's good to hear, because every time I've seen them, I have, thought that they were spot monkeys, and that's what really kind of didn't interest me about them. But it's good to know. Well, obviously, whenever you're hanging around with guys like Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, you would imagine that some of that's going to rub off. That
for sure.
They're going to get good at what they do,
Mm.
So I can't fault that. I think it's very interesting, though, and this is one thing that I would like to bring up with regards to All Elite Wrestling, is that a lot of the guys they've signed to deals have like they can wrestle elsewhere, so long as they give All Elite Wrestling like priority. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. But one thing that I wanted to bring up about that is that the Pac situation, which I would like to cover very quickly here.
Mm-hmm.
In that Pac was going to work at this event, and he was gonna lose to Hangman Page.
No, I think he was going to beat Hangman Page.
Well, the reason they pulled him was because they didn't want him losing.
Yeah, but I think it was a future match for the title that he was supposed to lose, and that's what the issue was. Like, he was, I think he was fine with beating Hangman Page, but as long as he's the Dragon Gate champion, he doesn't want to lose. So.
Right. Now, I get that. That makes sense. That's smart business. Because it makes the company that he's representing look really good. Right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
That's totally smart. And and he's probably better off in Japan. The guy, or doing what he does, because the guy he's made a big name for himself in Japan, and can make a lot of money there. But I was seeing recently that Moxley's going to be going over there to fight. Who's he fighting? Juice Robinson?
Yeah.
And I'm like, are AEW going to take care of their own guys the way that New Japan or Dragon Gate are taking care of their guys?
Well, I would have thought so. There's going to surely be a bit of, the kind of like what TNA have done as well. Like, they've always been very protective of who their talent would wrestle on the independent scene and who they like lose to and stuff like that. So I imagine, even when the TV deal kicks in, maybe their talent will stop having so many like independent bookings. I don't know.
Right, because like it's the same thing with the WWE. That's one of the reasons why the wrestlers don't really go anywhere else, is because if they lose on other shows, they're not going to look as good as they do on a WWE show.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And like that's just good business. Also, mainly because if they're out wrestling somewhere else, they could get hurt, and that could take them time away from the main show. But for the purposes of an example, let's just say that one of the reasons that they are exclusive is because you don't want them losing anywhere else, because it would devalue their luster somewhat. So once this all starts to happen, if all of this starts to happen, we're like, WWE are being protected with their guys, and TNA are being protected with their guys, and Dragon Gate and New Japan and All Elite Wrestling are all being protected with their guys. Eventually nobody's gonna lose. You know what I mean? Or like eventually we're gonna see what's coming. We're gonna see who the winner is gonna be. You know what I mean? I'm just a little bit worried about. Well, I just thought it was funny that All Elite Wrestling very quickly and early on were like, we're not gonna, treat our wrestlers the way other companies have treated them. we're not going to be all exclusive, and we're not going to this and that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you and me both were like, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah.
And now that we're getting closer to a deal and getting closer to them being on a TV, this is the kind of stuff I would like to keep an eye on. You know what I mean? I don't want to make it sound like I'm being too scrutinous of them, and I don't want to make it sound like they're a bunch of hypocrites, because business changes and it's fluid and it's hard to pin down. But I think the issue that we had was you shouldn't be making too many promises that you logically aren't going to be able to keep.
Because, by the sounds of it, they really want to do, give more creative freedom to the wrestlers.
Yes.
Which is something I am all for. Because you think back to the Attitude Era and like the freedom that those wrestlers had there to kind of find like gimmicks and personalities and connect with the crowd and stuff. Like, the big problem with WWE these days is there is no freedom. Everything is scripted. Everything. I think Jon Moxley talks about this in his Talk Is Jericho interview, like talking about how everything is so micromanaged that it just kind of takes the fun out of it. Like, I was even reading like a interview TJ Perkins did, where he's saying like he'd be in the ring and like it was almost like he was watching the match unfold, like with everyone else on the other side of the guardrail, because he had no freedom in putting matches together. It was all done by the producers backstage.
Right.
So with AEW though, it sounds like they want to give the wrestlers the freedom to wrestle the matches that they want to wrestle, that are going to be like the best matches that they can put together. They want to give them freedom on the mic as well. And, I think the both of us are a bit doubtful of how that will work in the long run because of, sponsors and, standards and practices and stuff like that.
Yes.
But, it sounds like a good kind of dream to aim for.
It does. It all sounds promising. But like you said, you have things to factor in, like sponsors and all of that, TV deals and advertising, and you also have to factor in other people's egos. I think that there you need to find the strict balance between micromanaging and complete freedom, because people need that. They need. I think that at some point, and that's why I guess it's good for a guy like Billy Gunn or someone to be like a producer, and Dean Malenko as well. I think is on All Elite Wrestling as well, and it's good for guys like that to be involved because they know a lot about timing matches and putting matches together. And I think that that's important because while it's good to have your own kind of creative freedom when you put together a match, also independent wrestling especially, there is a habit of maybe putting in all your spots and putting in all your bits, and a lot of that isn't necessary. So and the same goes with like being on the mic. It's all good to have that kind of creative freedom, but like once it just all ends with like everybody putting themselves over, at some point someone's gonna have to kind of step in and go, okay, cool, but we need to streamline it a bit. Now, obviously, that's still a far cry from what the WWE were like, because they were micromanaging to like a microscopic degree, which I don't think either of us agree with. Like that was the issue, is that it all seemed a little bit too clean and a little bit too like rehearsed, and sometimes it's not. It's in regards to promos, for example, it's not always fun to listen to that if it seems too scripted. So there needs to be a balance there where you need to. But you see, that's the issue with the WWE. I understand why they micromanage their promos so much. The in-ring work, not so much. I don't quite understand why they are so strict with it that way because they need to give the people a little bit more freedom because it's all about wrestling. But I understand why they critique and script so much of their talking stuff because God bless them, like you said, they have a lot of advertisers to work out and a lot of that kind of stuff to look after. Um, that like if some people were to go out and say whatever they want to say, they could get in trouble for it. They could just end up saying something that just as much as we don't like to admit it, the WWE is family friendly and it's PG and it's that way because that's where the money is and that's where the advertisers are. And we all love the Attitude Era, but they didn't make a lot of money on advertising back then because even though wrestling was hot, people didn't want to be associated with it because of the crass kind of nature of it. And so you understand why these days it's a little bit, a little bit more strict. And so therefore they have to be a little bit more strict with promos and stuff like that because you probably would just otherwise just get somebody saying silly things for the sake of popping the crowd, but without like any kind of long term thought behind it. You know what I mean? So I get why they do that, but yes, I would agree that they need to kind of loosen up a little bit when it comes to like putting the matches together because the wrestlers themselves need to know how to do that stuff and they need to know how to because that's part of the art. Although what I do love about, from what I've heard of this Jon Moxley podcast that he does with Chris Jericho, I'm only like 40 minutes in, half an hour in. But one thing that I love at the bit I've got to is where he talks about promos and he says that promos were his favorite part of wrestling, and that he's good at them and he used to practice them and he knows how to talk, and that's what used to get him frustrated about working there in the WWE was that that was a bit that he was so happy about and so excited about and so good at, and legit like one of the reasons why that's why I noticed him before I like signed him. Was just the way he would cut promos because he had a very interesting way of talking, and it seems counterproductive to take a man like Jon Moxley and to kind of
new to him.
Yes, to censor him that much. I mean, I think that it kind of works both ways. You need to be able to you need to micromanage your people enough so that they're not going to say anything outrageous. But you also have to trust in the people that are good enough to talk out there. Because Moxley would have totally been one of those guys I could have trusted to put on his own promos.
Yeah, for sure.
And to not say anything too outrageous, because he gets what company he works for. He understands it, and he would be able to like toe the line between like outrageous and good. He would have been able to do that. He would have been one of those guys you could trust. You know what I mean? Like for example, in the Attitude Era, you could trust The Rock to go out and cut a good promo, even though a lot of The Rock's promos were kind of written or half written with like other people. But the guy was good enough that if he went off script, you'd be like, he's built up a good enough reputation to be able to carry it.
Yeah.
So, Austin, Triple H, those guys, Triple H and Shawn Michaels would go off script all the time, but they were good enough at what they did that they could kind of work it. You know what I mean? And for the most part, they didn't go too far. I mean,
yeah, no one's dropping F-bombs or anything.
Right, like they were still smart enough about what they did. So Moxley would have been one of those guys that if I were Vince McMahon, I would have had the trust in him to be able to go out there and carry that himself. You know what I mean? But for example, there would have been other people in that company that I would have been like, yes, all right, we got to script your promo for you. Because you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yeah, but again, like part of it is like a learning process as well, and how are they supposed to learn if they're just given these scripts to read from? Like,
right.
I think if they'd be given the chance to, experiment from time to time and just get familiar with cutting their own promos and finding their own voice, then it would be a great thing. But it just doesn't happen at all. So yeah, like how can they get better at it when they don't even have a chance to do it in the first place?
Well, that's the problem with it being live all the time, is that, they lose the confidence in their talent to be able to go out and kind of cut those promos in one go. And it's strange that they're doing such a good job in NXT of working with people like that and cutting promo classes and working like that and getting people used to performing in a wrestling standpoint and from a cutting promo standpoint in front of crowds and getting them used to that. So you would imagine that once they quote unquote graduate from NXT to the main roster, they should be allowed a certain amount of creative freedom with what they say, given that they have learned the ropes by that point, and they should know what they're doing. Guys like Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, if they're not already, they should be the ones that have the kind of creative freedom to, a couple of bullet points and then off they go, right?
Exactly, yeah.
They should be the kind of guys, because they can do it. Reigns, I think, can, that seemed to be one of the biggest problems that Roman Reigns suffered through, was that he wasn't really allowed to be himself. And I think that if he was just this cool kind of like whatever, like he seemed like in the Shield, he seemed like this, like he was the big tough guy, but also he didn't seem like he was that concerned about stuff.
Yeah.
He seemed a little bit easygoing. Like if you just let him go out there and be that guy, he's gonna get over. You know what I mean? Like just let him be himself, or an exaggerated version of himself, and he'll be fine. You don't have to script it too much. Same with Seth Rollins, he'd be able to, he'd be able to, cover that easily enough. A lot of those guys, Kevin Owens, I'm sure, has a creative freedom with the stuff he says, right?
I mean, I'd assume so. A lot of it does seem to have his sort of personality, like coming through. So you'd think so.
Right.
But I mean, like Seth Rollins, though, I don't know if you ever watched Ring of Honor back in the day when like he first showed up there. He wasn't really a very good talker at all. But he, like, since coming to WWE, he's developed so well in that regard. And yeah, like I think nowadays he's the kind of guy who could probably go off and cut a promo without being told exactly what to say. But right. Again, it's just not going to happen.
But that's the thing. Like, whenever before that he was in the company, might not have been his strongest suit, right? You could easily say the same thing about Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Everybody knows that guy, and like he wasn't that bad at talking, but he didn't. But it's because he didn't need to. His point was that he was a great wrestler, and he fucking did it great. And you could easily say that both of those guys, since being in this company, have improved leaps and bounds when it comes to talking. Like if you watch Danny Bryan talking now, you're like, holy shit, dude. He's absolutely one of the best, because he gets you to believe in the shit that he's saying, which is the point. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you know a guy is good on the mic. And that's when you know a guy's good in the ring, because he makes you believe. That's the whole point. Like one of my favorite matches that I've ever seen. I saw like Ring of Honor were giving away like free matches on their YouTube page, and there was one which was Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson as he was in the day, against AJ Styles from I don't know 2004 maybe. Whenever he was champion anyway. And it was a fantastic match, and it was fantastic because it legit seemed just like two guys wrestling. I've never seen a match, probably since then and maybe before then, that makes pro wrestling seem like a legitimate sport more than that match. Like it was perfect because it seemed like they were really trying to beat each other, and it seemed like everything they were doing was crisp and perfect, and they were really trying to fight. And I'm like, that's what a wrestling match is. That's what it's supposed to be. incredible. But like, so like he could work, and like, and the point is like, vocally and wrestling wise, it's to make it believable. Like that's the point of wrestling,
Yeah,
is to make it seem like a sport. If you watch
exactly.
it and you forget that it's a gimmick, then they've done it right.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you watch it and you think, oh, yeah, this is a bit, then you know that they're not doing it right. And the problem with the WWE at the moment is that sometimes you hear their promos and they sound so scripted, you're like, well, this guy doesn't believe what he's saying, so it sounds fake. And then you watch a match and you're like, oh, it's all right. But, and it just seems a bit fake, it's just not. So, like, that's the kind of. But again, like, that's always been my issue with, like, some indie wrestling, is that because they get a bit too, like, flippy and a bit too, like, spot monkey about it, that they go the other way. And well, you see, here's the thing. Some people would argue with me on that point. They would say that pro wrestling doesn't have to be real. It has to be fun.
Yeah, as long as you lose yourself in the match, like, it doesn't really matter how you lose yourself in the match, whether it being athletic spectacle or just a ridiculous comedy match, or as long as you kind of get in the groove and have fun. Why does it matter?
Right. So long as it's good, then it's good. But like, that's always kind of been my issue with some of those other matches, is that once they get a bit too flippy and a bit too spot festy and stuff like that, that it kind of takes me out of it, because I'm like, it just looks a bit too choreographed. You know what I mean? It looks a little bit too, like, put upon. And to go back to the All Elite Wrestling, a point of them kind of, the wrestlers having the freedom to put the matches together themselves. All right, which I think is obviously like an important skill. But like, I feel like the real skill, and I'm sure we've talked about this one before, but I feel like the real skill is the calling it on the night. I wonder how many people really do that anymore. Who the guys who call it in the ring, or call the majority of it in the ring. Like, it's okay to sit at the back and plan and be meticulous about it if you want to guarantee that you're going to have a good match. But I would argue that the great wrestlers call a lot of that stuff in the ring, and that proves like how great that they were. In that they're like, a guy like Kurt Angle would be able to call a match in the ring. You know what I mean? And a lot of those guys from the Attitude Era, Rock and Austin and Triple H and all of those guys, maybe like, even John Cena would be able to edge all those guys. Like, that's probably, I feel like that was probably like the last proper generation of calling us stuff in the ring.
I was going to say, it is kind of a generational thing.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays, because it is so, like, overproduced, that, a lot of wrestlers coming up in the WWE system, like, some of the ones that they train, from the very start of their careers and stuff, like, they won't know any other way. They won't know about, how to call it in the ring, which is a crazy thing when you consider, stuff can go wrong, things happen, and then they kind of need to be able to, be able to call things on the fly and stuff like that, rather than, like, if something goes wrong and they botch a spot or whatever, they kind of go back to the well and just try and redo it.
Right.
Because there was a bit in the Jericho Omega match where they botched something, and rather than go straight back into it, I think it was from, like, Kenny Omega had Jericho on his shoulders about to do the one-winged angel, and Jericho was supposed to counter out into a DDT, and they fell awkwardly and it didn't look great, and then Omega for some reason pinned Jericho instead of Jericho pinning Omega, but they didn't, like, go right back into it again. They kind of did a few more spots before going back into it to kind of cover it a bit more. Whereas, like, you look at some of the botches that happen in WWE these days, and like wrestlers just go straight back to the spot again, try and do it again.
Right, like that grinds my gears. Whenever you see them, like they fuck up a spot and they just try to go straight back to the spot, and you're like, forget it, move on, do something else.
Yeah.
Like they get too worked up in like the mathematics of it. They're like, I do this bit and then this bit happens, then this and then this and that chains onto this, and like they think about it too much, and like they have it set up too well. And like, well, that's the people are gonna see through it. If it's too mechanical, they're gonna see through it.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that everybody I think needs to work on more. And from like a technical standpoint, I can understand why they do that. It's much safer to go through stuff like that and to talk it through and figure stuff out before you do it. Like much safer. So I understand that instead of just fucking leaping in, because like in indie wrestling, for example, people can get hurt because they try to do too much. They try to do moves that they're not prepared for, or they haven't practiced or something. So in a way, it's okay to kind of to go through the motions with those kind of matches. But like again, it's like if the indies are the independents and that's your training ground, if that's how you get started, then it should be places like All Elite Wrestling and TNA and Ring of Honor and WWE where you graduate. Like that's where you get there because you were good. You know what I mean? Independence is where you start, but you get your pay raise. You get your promotion once you hit those other companies, and you get that promotion because you're good. And once you get there, then you can you'll have learned enough to kind of tone it down with the way you work, and be kind of think about stuff more, and maybe call some stuff in the ring, and be safer with your promos and all of this stuff. You know what I mean? But the gimmick about that is that by the time you get there, you should know that stuff anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay, good. Because sometimes
it is like a learning experience.
Yeah.
That, the more you kind of wrestle and work your way up the ladder, obviously the better you're supposed to get at it. So,
right.
Yeah, but I don't know. Getting back to AEW, I guess, like, yeah, I think the one of the things they've talked about when they were talking about the signing with TNT and stuff is they want to make it more wrestling oriented as well. So it's not going to be loads of in-ring segments and like typical WWE bullshit where every show starts off with a 20-minute promo setting up a match later in the show and all that kind of jazz. It sounds like it's going to be almost treating it as a sport again. No one really believes that wrestling's real. There's no putting that genie back in the bottle, but at the same time, you can treat it in a way where it feels competitive and feels like stuff matters as well.
Yeah.
Which is, the big one, which the WWE just have failed to do consistently for so long. Like the way you get, people trading wins and losses without any rhyme or reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like the last 2 weeks of Raw, we've had Cesaro beat Ricochet, and then Ricochet beat Cesaro. It's like, well, great. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're putting on good matches, but it's,
well, what's the point?
Who's going over there? Who's better off them doing this?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the WWE's philosophy for too long has been just sticking stuff out there to fill time, whereas, hopefully AEW, when it comes around, is going to be more about, making stuff matter and making wins and losses matter, making championships matter. I mean, Christ, you look at the 24/7 title that they've just introduced in WWE, and it's already a joke. It's already a waste of time.
I'm gonna get onto that in a second because I did want to talk about the 24/7 championship. But there was something I wanted to talk about before that, which was the consistency. We've said plenty of times before that the problem in the WWE is that they're not consistent, and they need to pick a guy. Like, people were always ragging on Roman Reigns and how badly like his push went, and to be fair, it didn't go well. But at least he was the guy. Like, we got it. They were pushing him, and they wanted him to be the guy, and he won a lot because he was the guy, right?
Yeah.
Who's the guy now? Fucking, I don't know. Like, they don't have proper consistency. They don't stick to their guns. Like you said, there's too much kind of flip-flopping, and this guy wins, and then this guy wins, and it doesn't make any sense. And so, like, now they've got to the point where, like, it's really hard to care about any of them. Because why would you? You know, like, I think that's...
They don't make superstars anymore.
No, and that's the problem. Being a wrestling fan, a WWE fan for so long, right? And seeing a roster as incredible as the roster is now, and I feel like we say this every month, but like the roster is so good at this current moment in time, and yet, like they just make you not care about it, and it's mind-boggling that they would do that, or that they could do that with a roster of such unbelievable depth, and they don't make you don't care about it because there's no hierarchy and there's no like stages to it. Whenever I got into wrestling, you had like 8 main eventers, right? Let's say 8. You know, you had the clear cut favorites, which is Rock, Austin, Triple H, Undertaker, right? Big guys, but you also at the same bracket had Kane and the Big Show and Kurt Angle, right? Those are your de facto main eventers. Below them, you had guys like Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit, who were like big enough to get into the main event, but also, you know, could easily prop up the Intercontinental Championship, you know, scene, right?
Yeah.
But there was no issue with that. That worked. That was fine. You know what I mean? Then you had your like proper mid-carders. You had like Al Snow and Perry Saturn and, you know, Val Venus. Guys that like you knew weren't going to be... if you saw Val Venus versus The Rock on the card, you knew Val Venus wasn't going to win.
Yeah.
It didn't matter because it was The Rock. You know what I mean? Like, the hierarchy was there for a reason. The best guys were on top. Like, that's not to say that Val Venus or Al Snow or Perry Saturn aren't great workers. They are, but that was the point. They had a purpose on the show, and they filled it well because they were good at what they did. Because they knew and they understood that wrestling isn't about one guy. It's about everybody, and it's about everybody's position on the card. Everybody has a spot. You know what I mean? Like Scotty 2 Hotty or Crash Holly, right? They were over, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't win all the time. They've won like fucking, you know, what, 30% of the time? But it didn't matter.
Aside from hardcore title matches for Crash Holly.
Right, but even then he'd lose it like the day after that or something. Right?
Yeah.
But the point was, like, they had a place and a purpose. If for example, if Scotty Hotty did win, right, which was cool, but like I said, it would only be like 30% of the time.
Yeah.
So like it was like whoa, he won, that's cool. But also you're like, well, you know, for the most part, I'm not surprised to see him lose. It's not that big of a deal because they had purpose and like it all made sense and it all like you know, that's why you had, you know, the fucking Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins going over the Revival this year, because those two guys, their gimmick has been that they are losers all the time and they lost all the time, and they beat the tag team champions who so far this year have lost most of their matches anyway. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's just nonsense. Of course the two losers would beat the champions because the champions are losers. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's absolutely no point to it. And the problem is that people don't know what their spots are. Not everybody can be the star. And the problem with the internet is that they want everybody to be the star. which is, again, we've talked about this when it comes to AEW. They need to listen to this. Because if you listen to the internet, then, Seth Rollins is a star, and also Daniel Bryan, and also AJ Styles, and also Sami Zayn, and also Kevin Owens, and also, who else? Finn Balor, and also, what do you call that guy? Bobby Roode, and also this guy, and also that guy, yada, yada, yada. So then once one of them does lose, they complain about it. But then they also complain about how there's 50-50 booking. You know what I mean? Like, the problem is, whenever the WWE were pushing Roman Reigns, they weren't concerned with the complaints, because they're like, he's our guy, and we're sticking with him. And that's the point, right? And it worked, for the most part, because he, for a certain demographic, he got over, and he sold merchandise.
Yeah.
So, what they gotta do is the problem is that they don't build, like you said, they don't build stars. What they've been doing for the last couple of years is building star, singular,
Yeah.
and that's their issue. They need to have lots, because especially if they're going to have 2 main championships. They need to have 4 or 5 big guys, big names on both shows, and then you can swap them in and out, after a couple of months if you need to. But they need to be big first. You need to have these legitimate championship contenders on the shows. Otherwise, no one's going to care. Like, what the fuck is Dolph Ziggler doing?
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Why would I care about Dolph Ziggler? A guy who, number 1, hasn't been seen in months. Number 2, when he was seen, was losing a lot. Number 3, has categorically and historically not done very well in championship matches in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I care? It's obvious that that's just a little stopgap while they go to Saudi Arabia. And, argument could have been, just don't fucking go to Saudi Arabia. But that's a whole other fucking argument. But, that's their problem, is consistency. They don't have any, and they need to stick to their guns, and they need to pick... This is a company that's making Shinsuke Nakamura do fuck all.
Yeah, when was the last time he was even on TV?
Right, fucking Shinsuke Nakamura. And they're making him do this weird fucking... I mean, if they were smart, they would have had Shinsuke and Rusev as the top heels. Separately. But instead, they have them teamed together in a tag team that is barely on TV and doesn't make any sense. I'm like, this is dumb. Like, it's strange.
It's almost like they've got too many wrestlers on their roster, though.
Yeah.
They've got too many guys, and yet they struggle to fill 3 hours of Raw. It's just mind-boggling. Like, surely they should just let these guys go out and wrestle. It doesn't make sense. Well, aside from the idea that they've signed all these people for the sole purpose of them not going off to other companies and working there. Because that seems to be, not to be too cynical about it, but it seems to be the major reason why they sign a lot of these guys is so other people can't have them, rather than actually having plans for them or, intending to get their money's worth from them. So
right.
It's a pretty weird situation in the WWE in general when you've got so many guys like Shinsuke Nakamura, like Bobby Roode, like Rusev, like any number of guys, like EC3, who's still being completely wasted.
Right. Now, here's the thing, though, because you'll soon figure, they would soon figure out the proper hierarchy of stuff if they were to release people and then see how far they get on the independents. For example, if they were to release a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura, bam, he's like right back at the top of the card anywhere he goes.
Yeah.
Right? Fact, he just will be anywhere because he's that good. And he's like, that's proof that what they're doing with him now is wasting him. But if you pick somebody else that they're not really using, say fucking EC3 for the sake of argument. EC3 is great. He's really good at what he does. But is he going to go somewhere and be the top of the card everywhere he goes? Maybe not. But he's going to be a solid hand. He's going to be, he deserves to be used more than he's been using. Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be top of the card everywhere he goes. But there is a guy who'd be perfectly fine as like, you know, Intercontinental Champion or something like that.
Well, I mean, he proved in TNA that given the opportunity, he could rise to the top of the card. So, but in WWE, he's not getting any kind of opportunity. I don't think he's even spoken once since he was brought up to the main roster, and I think he's only wrestled like maybe once or twice on Raw, and other than appearing in like random backstage segments and not doing much of anything in them. It's like, well, what's he doing here? Well, yeah, at least let him stay in NXT where he could have, actually had a storyline and got to show what he could do.
My point is that, like, there are some guys that you can sign just to keep them away from the independents, and that's vindictive, but, like, whatever. But there's also people like Shinsuke Nakamura who you've signed, and, like, to keep them away from wrestling is a sin towards wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, to not use them properly is criminal. Because they're that good, and you have to use them properly. And like again, I'm not saying that Shinsuke, although he should be, but he doesn't have to be like heavyweight champion all the time. But he needs to have like a prominent kind of place on the show because he's that good at what he does. And like to forget about him and bury him is bizarre. And they're doing that to a lot of like big people. And I would have him as an upper mid carder for sure because that's the proper place for him, and he do well at that. He thrive at that. And I think that there are people on the show, for example, that if you release them, they do well on the independents because they'd have the rub that they were in the WWE. But you'd soon find their luster might not go as far as they think. I think that there are people in the WWE who believe their own hype and think up, kind of above their own station. And I'm like, if there were a hierarchy again, like there was in the Attitude Era, some people might be on the lower end of the card. But these days, they wouldn't dig that because they think that they're entitled to something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that, like, if you were to talk to any wrestler from 20 years ago, they would tell you that's a stupid way to think because somebody has to start the show, and some people have to lose, and that's just the way it is. That's wrestling. If it's going to be gimmicked, then you have to, obviously that's the way it has to go. Otherwise, this is how you end up with 50-50 booking. So, I think that there are definitely some people, and here's another thing that I want to say, and I hate for this podcast to run on too long because I did still want to talk a little bit about the stupid 24/7 Hardcore Championship. But there's been a lot of rumors that there are a lot of people in the WWE who are unhappy and who want to leave. Right?
Oh, yeah, loads.
Right. Now, the thing is, a lot of these people are going to want to go to All Elite Wrestling. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be room for them. They can go, but they're just going to end up in the same position, which is they're not going to be used. Because they can't be used, because you can't put all these people on top at all at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm saying like a person like Sasha Banks, for example, she's probably gonna want to go somewhere like All Elite Wrestling, where the spotlight's gonna be on her. But they probably already have plans, and they might not be able to fit them in. She would do better on the independents, where she totally would be able to shine, because she would be able to get that rub from being a former WWE superstar, and just she would do well on name value alone. But like, if she were to go straight to All Elite Wrestling, they probably have plans already in place, or they have something, they're already building up a rapport with other wrestlers at the moment. Not to say that they wouldn't bring her in. I'm saying they might not, automatically do the old TNA business of bring her straight in and then give her the title and then do fuck all with her.
Yeah.
Because,
but then there are options, though. It doesn't just have to be AEW. There is TNA, there's Ring of Honor, there's MLW.
right.
There's,
But like, my point is that you got to see how good these guys are once they leave. Like I said, a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura is going to get booked anywhere. It doesn't matter. Right? And he's happy enough to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, from what I've seen, it seems a little bit to me like somebody like Sasha Banks would be a little. I mean, she seems annoyed that she's not being used properly the way she is now, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine if she went somewhere else, how long is it before she starts feeling that way too? Somewhere
Well,
else. There's only a
it
finite amount
depends,
of people you can put on TV, and there's only a finite amount of people who can be on top. And I think that at some point, a lot of the people in the WWE need to remember that there is supposed to be a hierarchy, and that the guys who are running All Elite Wrestling are very quickly going to realize that there is a hierarchy, and there has to be for any show to work, for any wrestling show to work, there has to be. And that's just the way it is. Now, in regards to the stupid 24/7 belt, I like it and I hate it. And I hate it because it looks stupid, it's got a stupid name, and it had absolutely no build up to it whatsoever. You know? Like,
Yep.
they were like, here's a belt. Like, who cares? Why would anybody want it?
Well, the fact that they didn't even have a match to crown the first champion, Mick Foley just literally laid it down in the middle of the ring and said, "Whoever gets it first is the first champion."
Right? Like why? Like, they didn't make it seem like it was worth getting. So like, why would you want to get it? Now, the reason I like it is because it's silly. Like, it's just fun. You know, sometimes when I was watching it, some of the little bits, you're like, this is part of why I got into wrestling in the first place, because it's just silly. Because a lot of the hardcore stuff from way back when was dumb. Was just really
it descended into dumbness
so
pretty
stupid.
quickly.
But do you remember the bit where, you know, they were fighting in a circus? I think it was a circus. It was like the Main Street Posse were fighting Crash Holly in a circus, and he ran away.
I think it was more like a soft play, like
No.
kids.
There was one where they were outside. Like, they did that as well, but there was definitely one where they were outside, and I think it was like in a circus or something like that. And
I don't remember that one.
There was like one in the airport and stuff like this. I'm like, it's silly. And if we see more like that, if we see videos like that on online, you know, that would be fun. Like, there's is it the DDT promotion or is it the DDT championship? I can't remember which it is.
I'm pretty sure it's the DDT promotion.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They have a very similar kind of 24/7 championship, where anybody can kind of do whatever, and it's just silly, and it's fun, and you can like there's room for it in the show. You know what I mean? Like, if they do it right, there's room for it, and it gives some of those other guys something to do. Right? Now, even if it looks like a lower mid, card belt, that's fine, because then at least you can structure your, like, that's the issue. You need to start structuring your roster in terms of the belts, right?
Yeah.
Like, who because of that lower thing there, you can kind of see, like, Titus O'Neil and R-Truth. That makes sense as those kind of guys who would sniff around that belt, right? That totally makes sense. Whereas you move up a thing, right? Finn Balor is the Intercontinental Champion, and Andrade is, number one contender. But who else is logically going to fight for that belt? You don't know, because they haven't made it clear. That's what I'm saying. So at the point it is now, I don't hate the 24/7 championship. I hate the look of it and I hate the name of it, but I don't hate the idea of it.
But they're just wasting it, though. The idea behind it is sound. I like the nostalgia factor. Like you said, like, it brings back some good memories of the hardcore title as just like a fun, stupid release. And but I mean, now we're in a situation with the internet, with like everyone's got a camera on their phone and can upload videos and stuff. Why aren't they taking advantage of this? Why aren't they showing like R-Truth, going through airports and stuff with other wrestlers trying to roll him up or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, they should totally be taking advantage of it and doing fun stuff which creates a buzz and isn't reliant on like Vince's shoddy writing on Raw or whatever. But they're not. They've introduced it, and then within a week it's become like a joke, an afterthought, and it's like, well, why should we care about this title if you don't care about it?
Right. Like, that's been my issue, is that it seems like they don't care about a lot of the stuff they do, and it's hard for us to care if they don't care. I feel like that kind of stuff, that those videos of them sneaking around, like that's gonna come eventually. I think at the moment they're just kind of figuring stuff out, and I feel like it's sooner rather than later we're gonna get some of that stuff. You know what I mean?
I mean, I hope so.
Because it's so obvious. It just makes sense for them to do that shit. But it remains to be seen whether or not they'll be smart enough to pull that trigger, because you never know. Never underestimate their fucking stupidity. So, is there anything else you want to say about the current state of wrestling or All Elite Wrestling or anything like that before we wrap things up?
Not especially. I mean, I was gonna mention as well, like Cody's little jab at Triple H.
Oh,
which
yeah, I wanted to.
Was interesting, yeah. Like the whole smashing of the throne with the sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, I saw it and I just thought it was a bit cheesy. I wasn't like offended by it or anything.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like I think Triple H called AEW a pissant company during the Hall of Fame when he was like joking around with Billy Gunn.
Yes.
So it's not like, I mean, there was a reason for doing it, but it almost seemed like aiming at the wrong person. Like if he's going to take a shot at anyone, surely he should be taking a shot at Vince rather than Triple H, because everyone kind of expects Triple H to be the savior of WWE whenever he does take over. But yeah, it was a funny little moment, I guess.
For the record, I did see that little moment of Cody Rhodes pretending to break a throne with a sledgehammer, and I didn't like that bit because it looked.
It looked goofy.
It did look goofy, and for all of their we're not going to be WWE, and for the most part, I feel like they seem to have pulled that off. But for them to still kind of go, here's a very very WWE-esque moment.
Yeah,
and I'm like, you didn't need to do that at all. I thought that was silly, and hopefully that it was just a one-off, and we don't see more of that in the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so, to be honest. I think they want to keep themselves as separate from WWE and people's consciousness as possible. They don't want to draw unnecessary comparisons or whatever like that. They mm-hmm. want to stand on their own 2 feet going forward. So yeah, fingers crossed we don't see too much more of that.
Yeah, I think that. I think that's the way it's going to be. They still have plenty of time to disappoint us, as every wrestling company does. They all got plenty of time. I don't know. I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I'm sure by the end of the year they'll have done something that we will say makes no sense.
Yeah. I
mean, it's just a fact. It's just the way wrestling works. But anyway.
But I'd take that, though, compared to, every 5 minutes on Raw or SmackDown.
Right. Yeah, as opposed to, fucking Brock Lesnar winning the Money in the Bank match. You're like, oh, god damn it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole matter for another day, I think. So, alright. We'll probably talk more about All Elite Wrestling in the future. And we definitely will talk about Brock Lesnar winning the Money in the Bank match in the future. But in the meantime, thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.